The vast Starship Command Center hummed with the quiet efficiency of the Galactic Concordance's most advanced monitoring station. Holographic displays flickered with countless stellar data points, each representing a potential point of interest or conquest. Strategist Vera stood motionless, her multifaceted eyes scanning the intricate network of star systems that formed the known galaxy. A junior analyst approached, carefully maintaining the prescribed distance of professional respect. "Strategist," she began, her voice modulated to convey precise information. "We've detected an anomalous human settlement in the Horizon Prime sector." Her taloned hand manipulated the holographic display, bringing forward a detailed scan of a distant planetary system. Vera's attention sharpened. Humans were a relatively new species in the galactic landscape, barely a blip in the centuries-long records of the Concordance. Most encounters had been brief, often ending with swift pacification or complete avoidance. This particular colony was unusual. Located in a resource-rich but strategically challenging sector, it defied the typical human settlement patterns they had observed. The planetary scan revealed a world of complex topography. Jagged mountain ranges cut through vast plains, with intricate river systems that seemed to wind with almost deliberate complexity. The human settlement sat nestled in a valley that appeared simultaneously vulnerable and impenetrable. Advanced geological mapping showed underground networks that suggested more than simple habitation. These were carefully planned defensive positions. "Expand the environmental analysis," Vera commanded, her neural link interfacing directly with the ship's computational systems. Layers of data began to unfold: atmospheric composition, geological stability, local resource distributions. Each layer told a story of meticulous planning. The colony's location was no accident. Positioned at the convergence of multiple geological fault lines, the settlement had been constructed with an understanding of the planet's natural defensive capabilities that went beyond typical colonization strategies. Underground water reservoirs could be redirected to create natural barriers. Mineral-rich rock formations could be quickly converted into defensive structures. Even the atmospheric conditions seemed to have been carefully considered. "Run a comprehensive technological assessment," Vera instructed, her curiosity now fully engaged. The initial scans had shown seemingly primitive infrastructure. No massive energy signatures, no advanced weapon platforms, no signs of the standard defensive technologies employed by most spacefaring civilizations. But primitive was not the same as unprepared. The technological analysis revealed a network of communication systems that was deceptively complex. Buried deep within the planetary crust were communication relays that used a hybrid system of quantum entanglement and traditional signal transmission. It was a method so unconventional that it nearly escaped the Concordance's initial scanning protocols. Power generation was equally intriguing. Instead of massive fusion reactors or antimatter generators typical of advanced civilizations, the humans had created a distributed energy network. Small, efficient generators were spread across the settlement, making them nearly impossible to disable through a single strike. Each structure seemed capable of becoming a power source, a communication hub, or a defensive position. The agricultural zones surrounding the main settlement told another part of the story. These were not simple food production areas. Each plot was carefully designed to serve multiple purposes: food production, water management, and potential defensive camouflage. Certain crop types could be quickly transformed into temporary barriers or signal-disrupting environments. Vera's neural implants began processing the data, comparing it against thousands of colonial expansion records. This was not a typical human settlement. This was a carefully prepared defensive position that masqueraded as a simple colony. "Prepare preliminary invasion protocols," she commanded, her voice maintaining its usual calm. But something beneath the surface had changed. The routine assessment of a potential target had transformed into something more, a genuine moment of professional intrigue. The junior analyst hesitated, detecting an unusual undertone in the strategist's typically measured response. "Strategist," she ventured, "the standard pacification protocols may require significant modification. Vera's multifaceted eyes reflected the holographic display, watching the seemingly innocent settlement that was beginning to look like anything but a simple target. Indeed, she responded, a rare hint of anticipation coloring her typically neutral tone. Indeed, they will. In the vast, cold expanse of the monitoring station, the first seeds of a remarkable encounter were being planted, though neither the Conquerors nor the human settlers fully understood the significance of what was about to unfold. The first wave of Concordance assault ships descended through Horizon Prime's atmosphere like a metallic storm. Sleek and predatory, their hulls shimmered with adaptive camouflage that could blend into planetary backgrounds at a moment's notice. Standard invasion protocols suggested complete capitulation within 3 standard planetary rotations, a timeline the Concordance had maintained across dozens of conquered worlds. Commander Lorax watched from the primary assault carrier, his neural implants feeding him real-time tactical information. Holographic displays danced around him, showing projected landing zones, potential resistance points, and estimated population distribution. Each colored marker represented a potential threat, each grid section a territory to be subdued. The bio-enhanced assault teams prepared for deployment. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, these warriors represented the pinnacle of Concordance military engineering. Adaptive neural mesh suits covered their bodies, providing near-instantaneous threat assessment and combat response. Weapon systems integrated directly into their biomechanical exoskeletons could shift configuration faster than most species could perceive. Initial bombardment sequences began with calculated precision. Plasma-based suppression fire swept across the designated landing zones, designed to neutralize any surface-level defensive capabilities. The energy signatures should have reduced most standard colonial defenses to smoldering craters. But something was different. The first indication came as a subtle anomaly in the targeting systems. Where massive energy dispersal was expected, the bombardment seemed to dissipate in unexpected patterns. Ground-level sensors showed bizarre energy reflections, as if the landscape itself was responding to the attack. Tactical irregularity detected, the ship's primary combat intelligence reported, its synthesized voice devoid of emotion. Defensive response does not match predictive models. Commander Lorax leaned forward, mandibles clicking with an unusual mixture of curiosity and growing concern. The first dropships were already descending, their massive forms cutting through the planet's atmosphere with thunderous precision. Suddenly, the landscape transformed. What had appeared to be simple agricultural zones became a complex defensive network. Modular structures rose from seemingly innocuous ground positions, their designs shifting and adapting with a fluidity that defied conventional engineering principles. Defensive barriers materialized from what moments ago had been crop fields, their compositions changing to absorb and redirect incoming energy weapons. The first Concordance ground teams touched down in what should have been a predetermined secure zone. Their neural interfaces hummed with predictive combat algorithms, mapping potential threat vectors in milliseconds. Standard invasion protocols suggested immediate territorial control with minimal resistance. Instead, they found themselves in a landscape that was alive with resistance. Hidden gun emplacements emerged from carefully camouflaged positions. These were not standard defensive weapons, but hybrid systems that seemed to draw power from the surrounding environment. A rock formation would suddenly reveal a sophisticated targeting array. An apparently simple irrigation channel would redirect energy weapons with mathematical precision. Communication channels between the assault teams became a cacophony of confusion. Reports came in from multiple sectors. Defensive positions that should not exist, weapon systems that defied standard technological understanding, terrain that seemed to change its fundamental characteristics in response to the invasion. One assault team reported a defensive position that appeared to be constructed from modified agricultural equipment. Harvesting machines had been transformed into complex defensive platforms, their original purpose twisted into something entirely unexpected. Another team discovered communication networks buried so deeply into the planetary crust that traditional scanning methods could not detect them. The human defenders moved with a coordination that suggested something beyond standard military training. Each defensive position seemed to anticipate the Concordance's next move, as if the entire planetary surface was a single, living organism preparing to repel an invasive force. Commander Lorax's neural implants began to overheat from the constant stream of tactical anomalies. This was not the quick subjugation they had anticipated. This was something entirely different. Tactical recalibration required. The combat intelligence reported a hint of uncertainty entering its typically emotionless communication. Current invasion protocols proving ineffective. As the first hour of engagement concluded, the Concordants found themselves in a situation they had never encountered. The human colony was not just resisting. It was actively transforming the very nature of the conflict. In the command carrier, Commander Lorax realized something profound. They were no longer conducting a standard invasion. They had stumbled into something far more complex, far more dangerous. The battle for Horizon Prime had begun, and nothing would be the same again. The human response to the Concordance invasion defied every known principle of warfare in the galactic records. What should have been a straightforward military engagement had transformed into a complex, multi-dimensional challenge that pushed the limits of tactical understanding. In the central command bunker of the human colony, a diverse team of researchers, engineers, and military strategists worked with a synchronicity that was almost supernatural. The room hummed with an energy of collaborative problem-solving, each individual bringing a unique perspective to the unfolding crisis. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a systems integration specialist, stood before a massive holographic display that mapped the ongoing conflict. Her fingers danced across multiple interfaces, each movement coordinating resources that seemed to bend the very rules of tactical engagement. "We're not just defending," she muttered to her colleague, a former planetary defense strategist named Marcus Chen. "We're rewriting the entire concept of defensive warfare." The landscape itself became a weapon. Where the Concordants saw terrain, the human defenders saw a complex system of potential advantages. Agricultural irrigation channels were rapidly converted into sophisticated communication networks. Mining equipment became improvised defensive platforms. Even the planet's geological features were being manipulated in ways that defied traditional military doctrine. A small team discovered that the planet's unique mineral composition could be used to create localized electromagnetic pulse generators from what appeared to be standard mining equipment. Within hours, they had developed a method to disrupt Concordance communication and targeting systems using nothing more than repurposed industrial machinery. Another group focused on psychological disruption. They began broadcasting carefully crafted communication signals that did more than just jam enemy frequencies. These transmissions created deliberate patterns of confusion, exploiting the neural interfaces of the Concordance assault teams. Marcus Chen explained the approach to a group of junior defenders. "Their neural networks expect predictable responses," he said, pointing to a complex diagram. "We're going to give them anything but predictability." The most shocking innovation came from an unexpected source. A team of agricultural researchers discovered that certain crop varieties could be rapidly modified to create natural electromagnetic interference. By carefully adjusting the genetic expression of specific plant species, they could create living barriers that disrupted advanced scanning and communication technologies. Concordance assault teams found themselves navigating a landscape that seemed to actively resist their invasion. Weapon systems that should have functioned with perfect precision began to malfunction in ways that defied logical explanation. Communication networks became unreliable, tactical assessments became impossible, and previously foolproof invasion strategies crumbled. One Concordance tactical unit reported an incident that seemed impossible. While attempting to establish a forward base, their entire communication network collapsed. What appeared to be simple agricultural equipment suddenly generated complex electromagnetic fields that rendered their most advanced technology useless. The human defenders moved with a fluidity that suggested something beyond standard military training. Each defensive position seemed to anticipate the Concordance's next move, as if the entire planetary surface was a single living organism preparing to repel an invasive force. Dr. Rodriguez noticed a pattern emerging. The Concordance's technological superiority was becoming their greatest weakness. Their reliance on complex neural interfaces and highly specialized combat systems made them vulnerable to creative disruption. They're built for a specific type of warfare, she explained to her team. We're showing them a type of conflict they've never conceived possible. Underground research facilities became improvised war rooms. Scientists who had previously worked on agricultural development now found themselves at the forefront of planetary defense. Every piece of equipment, every scientific principle became a potential weapon. The colony's communication network transformed into something far more than a simple defensive system. It became a living, adaptive organism that could reconfigure itself faster than the Concordance could analyze it. Communication relays hidden in agricultural equipment, geological formations, and seemingly innocuous infrastructure created a defense network that was impossible to predict or neutralize. As the first day of conflict drew to a close, the Concordance found themselves facing a fundamental challenge to their understanding of warfare. This was not a simple planetary defense. This was a complete reimagining of how a technologically outmatched civilization could resist invasion. The human defenders of Horizon Prime had done more than just resist. They had transformed the entire concept of defensive warfare, creating a blueprint that would challenge military strategists across the galaxy for generations to come. The communication strategy began as a whisper, almost imperceptible to conventional monitoring systems. Deep within the Concordance assault team's neural networks, something unprecedented started to take shape. A form of psychological warfare that transcended traditional battlefield tactics. Captain Vreen of the Concordance's primary assault division first noticed the anomaly during a routine neural network diagnostic. What should have been clean, precise communication channels had developed unexpected complexity. Subtle patterns emerged, information that seemed to slip between the standard communication protocols, creating ripples of uncertainty. The human defenders had discovered something profound about the Concordance's neural interface systems. These were not just communication networks, but complex psychological integration platforms. Every piece of transmitted information carried emotional and cognitive undertones that could be subtly manipulated. Dr. Marcus Chen, working with a team of communication specialists, explained the approach. Their neural networks are designed for absolute certainty, he said, tracing complex diagrams that mapped communication pathways. We're going to introduce calculated uncertainty. The first transmissions were masterpieces of psychological engineering. They weren't attacks or threats, but carefully constructed information packets designed to create cognitive dissonance. Historical data, cultural references, and seemingly random scientific information were woven together in patterns that challenged the Concordance soldiers' fundamental understanding of their mission. Concordance tactical units began experiencing unprecedented levels of operational confusion. Communication channels filled with information that should have been impossible. Tactical assessments became clouded with unexpected contextual layers. Each transmission carried multiple potential interpretations, creating a constant state of psychological tension. One assault team reported receiving what appeared to be personal communication logs that seemed to originate from within their own command structure. These transmissions contained fragments of conversations, strategic discussions, and personal interactions that should have been impossible to intercept. The information was technically accurate, but presented in ways that created profound doubt about the nature of their mission. Psychological warfare experts on the human side had identified a critical vulnerability in the Concordance's neural interface system. The technology that allowed for perfect information transfer also created a unique susceptibility to carefully crafted informational attacks. Captain Vreen watched in growing concern as his assault teams began to show signs of unprecedented psychological strain. Soldiers who had been engineered for absolute certainty now found themselves drowning in layers of contextual complexity. Their neural interfaces, designed to provide instant tactical clarity, now became conduits of calculated confusion. The human defenders used every available medium. Scientific publications were subtly modified and transmitted. Historical records were recontextualized. Even agricultural and geological data became weapons of psychological disruption. Each transmission carried multiple layers of potential meaning, challenging the Concordance's fundamental understanding of information processing. Most shocking was the humans' ability to use the Concordance's own communication systems against them. By understanding the deep neural integration of their opponent's technology, the defenders could introduce information that would spread like a cognitive virus through the entire assault network. Tactical units began to experience what could only be described as existential uncertainty. Their neural interfaces, designed to provide absolute clarity, now became sources of profound confusion. Every piece of incoming information carried multiple potential interpretations, creating a constant state of psychological tension. Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team had discovered something remarkable about information warfare. It wasn't about overwhelming the enemy with data, but about introducing carefully calculated uncertainty. Each transmission was a precision instrument designed to create specific psychological responses. The Concordance had always believed their neural interface technology represented the pinnacle of communication efficiency. The human defenders were showing them that technology could be a vulnerability as much as a strength. Assault teams found themselves questioning fundamental aspects of their mission. Communication channels that should have provided absolute clarity now became labyrinths of potential meaning. Each transmission carried weight beyond its immediate informational content, introducing layers of psychological complexity that the Concordance had never encountered. As the psychological campaign continued, something profound began to happen. The Concordance's assault teams were no longer just facing a physical resistance. They were confronting a form of warfare that challenged their most fundamental understanding of conflict, communication, and consciousness. Captain Vreen realized they were no longer dealing with a simple planetary defense. This was a complete reimagining of psychological engagement, a battle fought not just with weapons, but with information, context, and the most subtle manipulations of perception. The invasion of Horizon Prime had become something far more complex than anyone could have anticipated. It was a war of minds, of perception, of the very nature of understanding itself. The research facility beneath Horizon Prime's primary settlement was never meant to be a weapon development center. What had begun as a collaborative scientific outpost now transformed into the most dynamic technological adaptation laboratory in known space. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a massive workstation, surrounded by components from captured Concordance equipment. Her team worked with an intensity that bordered on collective inspiration. Each piece of alien technology was more than just a potential weapon. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved, a system to be understood and reimagined. "We're not just reverse engineering," she explained to a group of young researchers. "We're creating something entirely new. These technologies aren't just tools. They're languages waiting to be reinterpreted." The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of materials scientists discovered that the Concordance's adaptive armor could be partially reprogrammed using a combination of quantum signaling and biological interference patterns. What was once a defensive technology became a potential communication vector, a way to understand the deeper principles of the alien technology. In another section of the facility, engineers worked on transforming captured communication arrays. They discovered that the Concordance's neural interface systems contained fundamental design principles that could be adapted to completely different technological paradigms. Communication networks became fluid, adaptive systems that could change their fundamental structure in milliseconds. Marcus Chen, leading a team of systems integration specialists, demonstrated a remarkable breakthrough. A captured Concordance weapon system had been completely rebuilt. Where it once represented a tool of destruction, it now functioned as a complex environmental monitoring device, capable of detecting subtle changes in planetary conditions with unprecedented accuracy. The facility became a living laboratory of technological innovation, Every captured piece of equipment told a story, revealed a principle, suggested a new approach to understanding technology itself. The researchers worked with a sense of collective purpose that transcended traditional scientific methodologies. Agricultural monitoring systems were integrated with advanced scanning technologies. Mining equipment became sophisticated communication platforms. Even the most mundane pieces of infrastructure were being transformed into potential defensive or adaptive technologies. One of the most shocking developments came from the biotechnology team. They discovered that the Concordance's neural interface systems contained principles that could be adapted to biological systems. What had been purely technological communication could be integrated with organic neural networks in ways that defied previous scientific understanding. Dr. Rodriguez watched as a young researcher successfully integrated a captured communication module with a local plant species. The plant's cellular structure began to display communication capabilities that seemed to blur the line between biological and technological systems. "We're not just adapting their technology," she noted in her research log. "We're creating an entirely new technological paradigm." The facility's power generation systems underwent a complete transformation. By studying the Concordance's energy distribution technologies, the research team developed a planetary-scale energy network that could redistribute power with unprecedented efficiency. What were once separate infrastructure systems became a single adaptive energy organism. Communication technologies received perhaps the most radical reimagining. The team discovered that the Concordance's neural interface systems contained fundamental communication principles that could be applied to completely different technological platforms. Quantum entanglement, previously understood as a theoretical concept, became a practical communication method. A breakthrough came when the team successfully created a communication network that could adapt its fundamental structure in real time. Information could be transmitted through multiple potential pathways, making the system virtually impossible to intercept or disrupt. The most remarkable aspect of this technological transformation was its collaborative nature. Researchers from different disciplines worked together with a sense of collective purpose. Agricultural specialists worked alongside quantum physicists. Materials scientists collaborated with communication experts. The traditional boundaries of scientific disciplines dissolved in the face of collective necessity. Marcus Chen summarized the approach during a strategy meeting. "We're not just defending," he explained. "We're demonstrating that technology is a language, and we're becoming fluent in a language they never expected us to understand." As the Concordance continued their invasion, they remained unaware of the profound technological revolution happening beneath the surface of Horizon Prime. Each captured piece of equipment, each moment of interaction, was teaching the human defenders something fundamental about the nature of technology itself. The research facility had become more than a defensive center. It was a crucible of innovation, a place where the fundamental principles of technological understanding were being rewritten moment by moment. Horizon Prime was no longer just a colony under invasion. It had become the birthplace of a technological revolution that would challenge everything the Concordance believed about innovation, adaptation, and the very nature of technological progress. The moment of transformation began not with a massive weapon or a grand strategic maneuver, but with a series of seemingly small interconnected innovations that would reshape the entire conflict. Commander Lorax of the Concordance watched in growing disbelief as his carefully constructed invasion plan disintegrated. What had seemed like a routine planetary subjugation had become something entirely unprecedented. The holographic displays in his command carrier flickered with increasingly erratic data streams, each new piece of information challenging everything he understood about warfare. The human defenders had done something extraordinary. They had transformed the entire planet into a living, adaptive defensive system. Drone swarms emerged from what appeared to be agricultural equipment. Communication networks materialized from geological formations. Every piece of infrastructure became a potential weapon, every landscape a tactical advantage. Dr. Elena Rodriguez coordinated the defense from an underground command center that seemed to breathe with technological life. Her team had developed a planetary defense network that operated more like a living organism than a traditional military system. Each defensive position could communicate, adapt, and respond faster than any centralized command could predict. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected combination of technologies. Agricultural monitoring systems, modified communication arrays, and repurposed mining equipment created a defensive network that could predict and counter concordance assault patterns almost before they were initiated. A concordance assault team attempting to establish a forward base found themselves confronted by a landscape that seemed to actively resist their presence. Defensive systems emerged from what moments before had been seemingly innocent terrain. Crop fields transformed into communication hubs. Geological formations became complex defensive platforms. Marcus Chen, coordinating the planetary defense, explained the approach to his team. "We're not just defending," he said, pointing to a complex holographic display. "We're demonstrating that technology is a language, and we're becoming fluent in a language they never expected us to understand." The psychological impact was as significant as the technological one. Concordance assault teams found themselves facing a form of resistance that defied their most fundamental understanding of conflict. Their neural interfaces, designed to provide absolute tactical clarity, now became sources of profound uncertainty. Drone swarms created from modified agricultural equipment moved with a complexity that challenged traditional combat algorithms. These were not simple flying machines, but adaptive systems that could reconfigure themselves instantaneously. One moment they might function as communication relays, the next as defensive platforms, then as intricate scanning networks. Commander Lorax received a report that seemed to defy logical explanation. An entire assault division had been effectively neutralized, not by conventional weapons, but by a combination of environmental manipulation and information disruption. Their neural interfaces had been turned into sources of tactical confusion. Their communication networks transformed into labyrinths of misinformation. The planetary defense system had become something more than a military network. It was a living, adaptive organism that could respond to threats with a speed and complexity that made traditional military strategies obsolete. Each defensive position was not just a point of resistance, but a node in a vast, interconnected system of planetary defense. Geological formations became as important as technological systems. Underground water networks were redirected to create natural barriers. Mineral compositions were manipulated to create electromagnetic interference zones. The very planet seemed to be fighting alongside its human inhabitants. Dr. Rodriguez watched the conflict unfold with a sense of profound understanding. "We're not just defending," she noted in her command log. "We're demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to technological engagement." The Concordance assault teams found themselves facing a form of resistance that went beyond traditional military understanding. Their most advanced technologies became vulnerabilities. Their neural interfaces, designed for absolute tactical precision, now created more confusion than clarity. As the conflict entered its critical phase, it became clear that this was more than a simple planetary defense. This was a complete reimagining of how a technologically challenged civilization could resist invasion. The humans of Horizon Prime were not just fighting. They were demonstrating a new understanding of technological engagement. Commander Lorax realized something profound. The invasion was no longer about territorial conquest. It had become a fundamental challenge to the Concordance's understanding of technology, conflict, and adaptation. Horizon Prime had become more than a battlefield. It was a crucible of innovation, a place where the fundamental principles of technological understanding were being rewritten moment by moment. The turning point had arrived, and nothing would be the same again. The intelligence reports began to paint a picture far more complex than any previous encounters with human civilizations. What the Concordance had initially viewed as a simple colonial outpost was revealing itself to be something entirely different, a meticulously prepared planetary defense that challenged fundamental understanding of technological and social development. Strategist Vera, pored over the accumulated data, her multifaceted eyes tracking complex information streams that seemed to defy conventional analysis. Each new piece of information about the human colony of Horizon Prime added another layer to an increasingly intricate puzzle. The colony's preparation went far beyond standard defensive strategies. Every aspect of their society had been designed with potential conflict in mind. Agricultural systems could become defensive networks. Educational facilities were as much research centers as they were potential command structures. Even the colony's social organization demonstrated a level of adaptive potential that seemed almost organic in its complexity. Dr. Marcus Chen presented a comprehensive report that left the research team stunned. The human colony wasn't just prepared for invasion. It had been systematically developing technologies and social structures that could resist and adapt to multiple potential threats. Their approach to survival was holistic, treating technological, social, and environmental systems as interconnected networks rather than isolated components. Archaeological and sociological data revealed a profound approach to colonial development. The humans had not simply settled Horizon Prime. They had carefully studied the planet's geological, biological, and environmental characteristics, designing their entire infrastructure to be maximally adaptable. Underground research facilities told a remarkable story of collaborative innovation. Scientists from diverse disciplines worked together with a fluidity that challenged traditional academic boundaries. An agricultural specialist might collaborate with a quantum physicist, or a materials engineer might work alongside a communication expert. The traditional hierarchies of scientific research had been completely reimagined. The colony's technological approach defied conventional understanding. Where most civilizations developed specialized technologies, the humans of Horizon Prime created adaptive systems that could rapidly transform and repurpose themselves. A communication array could become a defensive platform. An agricultural monitoring system could transform into a complex scanning network. Genetic research revealed another layer of complexity. The colonists had been subtly adapting themselves to the planetary environment, developing physiological and cognitive capabilities that went beyond standard human parameters, not through invasive genetic modification, but through carefully designed environmental and educational approaches. Educational systems were particularly revealing. Rather than focusing on narrow specializations, the colony's learning infrastructure emphasized adaptive thinking, interdisciplinary collaboration, and a fundamental approach to problem-solving that treated knowledge as a fluid, interconnected system. The social organization of the colony challenged every preconceived notion of how a technological society should function. Leadership was not hierarchical but adaptive. Decision-making processes incorporated input from multiple disciplines, creating a form of collective intelligence that was more responsive than any centralized command structure. Technological development followed a principle of maximum adaptability. Each piece of infrastructure was designed with multiple potential uses. A mining tool could become a communication device. An agricultural monitoring system could transform into a defensive platform. The boundaries between different technological domains had been deliberately blurred. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's research revealed the most profound insight. The humans were not just defending against an invasion. They were demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to technological and social development. Their systems were designed to learn, adapt, and transform in real time. The Concordance's intelligence analysts found themselves confronting a critical revelation. This was not just a colony. This was a living laboratory of human potential, a place where technological, social, and environmental systems were being reimagined at a fundamental level. Communication networks demonstrated an unprecedented level of adaptive complexity. Information flow was not linear but multidimensional, with each piece of data capable of multiple interpretations and applications. The traditional understanding of communication as a simple transfer of information had been completely transformed. Strategist Vera realized something profound. The humans of Horizon Prime were not just resisting invasion. They were demonstrating a new paradigm of survival, one that treated technological, social, and environmental systems as deeply interconnected, adaptive networks. The colony had become more than a defensive position. It was a crucible of innovation, a place where the fundamental principles of technological and social development were being rewritten moment by moment. What had begun as a simple invasion had transformed into something far more significant. The Concordance was no longer facing a mere planetary defense. They were confronting a complete reimagining of what it meant to be a technological civilization. Horizon Prime was not just a colony. It was a window into humanity's potential, a potential that was far more complex, adaptive, and profound than anyone had ever imagined. The communication request came through unconventional channels, a carefully constructed signal that bypassed standard diplomatic protocols. Commander Lorax of the Concordance found himself facing something entirely unexpected. A direct communication from the human colony that challenged every established principle of interstellar conflict. The transmission room aboard the Concordance command carrier was designed for absolute control. Holographic interfaces shimmered with layers of security protocols, communication filtering systems that had processed thousands of diplomatic exchanges across multiple star systems. Yet this transmission seemed to slip through those defenses with an ease that was both impressive and unsettling. Dr. Elena Rodriguez appeared on the central holographic display. She was not dressed in military attire, nor did she present herself with the aggressive posturing typical of species under invasion. Instead, she looked like a researcher, calm and analytical, as if they were about to discuss a complex scientific problem rather than a planetary conflict. "We understand you're attempting to subjugate our colony," she began, her tone matter-of-fact. "We'd like to discuss why that's not going to be possible." Commander Lorax's neural interfaces began processing the communication, searching for hidden threats, tactical advantages, potential manipulation vectors. What he found instead was something far more complex, a communication strategy that was simultaneously direct and multidimensional. The humans presented not a threat, but a comprehensive analysis. They detailed the exact ways the Concordance invasion had failed, not as a boast, but as a clinical assessment. Each point was backed by intricate data, technological analysis, and a level of strategic insight that went far beyond standard defensive reporting. Marcus Chen, appearing alongside Dr. Rodriguez, began to outline the broader implications. "Our colony represents more than a simple territorial defense," he explained. "We are a living demonstration of adaptive potential. Each attempt to subjugate us becomes an opportunity for us to understand, to learn, to grow." The diplomatic communication was unlike anything in the Concordance's extensive first contact archives. The humans were not seeking conflict, nor were they begging for peace. They were presenting a comprehensive analysis of why the invasion was fundamentally flawed, both strategically and philosophically. Technological demonstrations accompanied their communication. Captured Concordance equipment appeared on secondary displays, now completely repurposed and improved. What had been advanced invasion technologies were now sophisticated research tools, communication platforms, environmental monitoring systems. "We don't view your technology as a weapon," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "We view it as a language, and we've become quite fluent." The most shocking element was the humans' complete lack of aggression. They were not threatening retaliation. They were not demanding surrender. They were presenting a comprehensive case for why continued conflict was mathematically and strategically nonsensical. Commander Lorax found his neural interfaces struggling to process the communication. The humans were not following any known diplomatic protocol. They were presenting conflict as a complex systemic problem to be solved, rather than a territorial dispute to be won. Marcus Chen outlined potential collaborative scenarios. Instead of viewing the encounter as an invasion, he presented it as a potential exchange of knowledge, a chance for mutual understanding. The proposal was so unexpected that it momentarily short-circuited standard Concordance diplomatic response matrices. The communication revealed the true nature of the human colony. This was not simply a defensive position. It was a living research facility, a collaborative environment designed to learn, adapt, and grow. Every aspect of their society, from agricultural systems to communication networks, was built around the principle of continuous adaptation. Dr. Rodriguez's final statement was perhaps the most profound. "We're not interested in defeating you," she said. "We're interested in understanding you. And we believe that understanding is far more valuable than conflict." The transmission carried multiple layers of communication. Visual data, technological demonstrations, scientific analysis, and philosophical propositions were woven together in a complex narrative that defied traditional communication structures. Commander Lorax realized something fundamental had changed. This was no longer about a planetary invasion. This was a fundamental challenge to the Concordance's entire understanding of interstellar interaction, technological development, and the nature of intelligent communication. The humans of Horizon Prime were offering something far more valuable than territorial defense. They were offering a new perspective, a way of understanding conflict, technology, and communication that went beyond traditional galactic paradigms. As the transmission concluded, Commander Lorax understood that the invasion had failed long before the first assault ships had entered the planetary atmosphere. The humans of Horizon Prime had transformed a potential conflict into an opportunity for mutual understanding. The galaxy would never be the same again.